how one man saved the nation in the 19th century. General Robert E. Lee, with one fateful decision, probably preserved America as a unified nation. It was April of 1865. The previous year, in 64, Lee and his Army of Northern Virginia of the Confederacy fought Grant and his Army of the Potomac toe-to-toe in a series of battles around Richmond. Lee defended Richmond and he beat Grant in a series of battles starting with the Wilderness in May of 64. Then Spotsylvania, Grant lost once again, and finally at Cold Harbor, Grant was decisively beaten. In fact, Grant initiated an ill-starred attack which cost 10,000 Union casualties in a matter of 30 minutes. He eventually decided that he better besiege Richmond and stop the frontal assaults. Lee and his men dug in Petersburg, south of Richmond. The siege went on for 8 months. Grant was afraid to attack Lee, entrenched as he was, so what he did was keep attacking further and further west, hoping to stretch Lee's lines past the breaking point. The last day of March in 65, Sheridan's cavalry, 12,000 strong, attacked the city of Five Forks, far in the western end of Lee's line. This attack succeeded. He broke Lee's line. More significantly, he intercepted the supply line from the railroad, Southside Railroad. It's bringing only the supplies that Lee still had coming up from the south. Lee now realized that he had to evacuate Richmond. He wanted to turn south to join with Joe Johnston's army down in the Carolinas, but Grant and Sheridan would not let him. They always kept on his left flank. April the 2nd of 65 was a beautiful day in Richmond. It was sunny. It was a Sunday morning. Actually, it was Palm Sunday. President Jefferson Davis and his family attended services at the St. Paul's Episcopal Church in downtown Richmond. He was surrounded almost all completely by women because the men were all away fighting. The women, according to one eyewitness, still had an elegance of dress after 4 years of war. Halfway through the service, a sexton came down the aisle with a telegram from General Lee, presented to President Davis. Davis, gaunt and pale, arose and strode out of the service. Actually, so did the rest of the congregation, because they knew right then and there that Richmond had to be evacuated. One witness talked about the wild orgy which then took place. The fires began with the arsenal, and once the arsenal was burning, 17 blocks of Richmond homes were burning. And then drunken ex-slaves were rolling whiskey barrels down the street. And one witness described the sad and terrified faces of the women peering out of the drawn blinds. Finally, the 9-story flour mill caught fire and the flames went high in the air. And Richmond, the capital city, was done. The night they tore old Dixie down, they used to call it. Lee evacuated the lines and began his long march. He had to go west. He put his tired army on the road and began to march. Night fell, it didn't matter. Morning now seamlessly intermingled with evening, darkness with sunset. The 5th of April became the 6th of April. 2 hours became 8 hours, which became 24 hours. Men simply putting their heads down and marching, one foot in front of the other. They had barely one night of rest in 4 days and no food. They continued to march. Men wandered forward in a giddy state, slipping in and out of sleep in confusion as they walked. As the nights wore on, Confederate troops, one by one, began to fall by the wayside. They said, "Let me just wait here for a moment till I can rest." Then they realized that they could not get up again. And they, with their dazed eyes, they gazed haplessly at Lee's army still lumbering west. Lee was with them, still stoic as always. Like his men, he had neither slept nor eaten since leaving Petersburg and Richmond. But there was a hope. On Wednesday morning of that week, there was the hope that Confederate boxcars loaded with food and rations for the soldiers would be waiting for them in the little town called Amelia Courthouse. When the Army got to Amelia Courthouse at the railroad station, Lee ordered the boxcars to be opened. This is what he found: 96 cannon, 164 boxes of artillery harnesses, 220 cases of ammunition, but no beef, no bacon, no meat, no flour, no cornmeal, no coffee, not a single ration. Lee was stunned. Still, he ordered the men to resume the march. Always on his left was Sheridan's cavalry. Behind him, chasing 4 hours behind, was Grant's enormous army. In every direction, there were dead men, mules, horses, dense columns of smoke from exploding vehicles. Lee was hoping to get to the shelter and protection of the Blue Ridge Mountains. One night he said to his son Roney, he said, "Keep your command together and in good spirits. Don't let them think of surrender. I will get you out of this." Always the father figure. Lee says, "I will get you out of this." Finally, they camped on the Appomattox River at Appomattox Courthouse on the morning of the 9th, and there before dawn, in the pitch black, he tried one more time to force a breakout. Lee's attack was beaten back. It was led by General Gordon. Gordon came back to Lee at 8:30 and said, we have fought to a frazzle and we can't get out. Now Lee is given two ominous choices finally set before him. Either A, surrender, or B, throw lives away at one last murderous fight in which most of his army would be killed and he would be killed. He called for a council of his generals. The council was, let's talk about surrendering. One of his generals, 29-year-old E. Porter Alexander, he was the man who held Lee's artillery brigade at Gettysburg. Porter Alexander turns to Lee and says, wait a minute, there is a third option. We can play our Confederate trump card. The trump card was exactly what Lincoln and Grant and Sherman had feared the most. That is, the men would take to the woods, evaporate into the hills, and become guerrilla warriors. Actually, President Jefferson Davis had told the nation the week before, this is what you must do. He said, we will eventually win this war, but you have to get out and do the guerrilla warriors. Eventually, they'll give up on us. It was still Lee's judgment, though, and not Davis's, that would be the most decisive here. What Davis wanted them to do was to employ deception and terror, attack as fast and quickly, scatter at night, strike again at night, or in the rain, or when the troops were eating or at rest, attack the enemy and destroy his psyche. Eventually, over a period of years, the South would be victorious. Actually, as military men have learned many times, guerrilla war does work. Look at the Irish Republican Army. They utilized guerrilla war for 30 years and brought the British to the bargaining table. Look at Lee's own father, Light Horse Harry Lee, who, along with Marion and the Swamp Foxes, fought a guerrilla war against the British in the southern part of the United States during the Revolutionary War. It does work. Eventually, luring your adversaries into an endless futile pursuit, a war of attrition would wear down the North and force their northern people to conclude that keeping the South in the Union would not be worth the pain and sacrifice. The Union would have to guard every railroad crossing, every river bridge with a blockhouse. They would have to guard every mile of railroad track, every tunnel. From a military standpoint, the plan of E. Porter Alexander's had considerable merit. The Confederacy was well supplied with long mountain ranges, endless swamps, and damp forests in order to offer sanctuary, and for the most determined partisans, it could have dragged on into the 20th century. It would have left terrible acrimony between the two sections of the nation, of course. We would have become a fragmented nation. We would have become like Yugoslavia, with old hatreds so deeply burned that no one was going to recover. Now, a sleep-deprived Robert E. Lee hears out General Porter Alexander,